So, good evening. Today was another day with some interesting news coming out of Germany that started this morning with a article in the Focus magazine where the editor-in-chief of the Focus magazine reported that he had attended a party in Berlin. It was a birthday party of a important businessman in Berlin. I forgot his name. It's not really that relevant. And at that party, Chancellor Scholz was present and a member of the executive, from the Christian Democratic Party, and his name is Joe. I have to read it, Chialo, because I'm not that familiar with his name. That spells C like Caesar, Hialo, and his first name is Joe. Joe is a member of the board of the Christian Democratic Union on the federal level, and he's also a member of the government there of the Christian Democratic Union in Berlin as a cultural attaché, basically. And it turned out that they had a discussion there, as it's customary at parties where you run around with your champagne glass and you do a little bit of talk here and there with other people. And there was a group of people, and Scholz walked into this, and they got to the discussion about the AfD. And then Scholz made a remark towards Joe in terms of, that the proceedings there in the Bundestag had yielded the support from the AfD and that sort of stuff. And then he asked basically Joe of why he did not object to this taking place at the Bundestag. And Joe answered that. And then Scholz got really irritated, and he called him Joe Hofnar. And the English word for the Hofnar is a jester. And let me explain all of this and how this goes. And this is very typical, let me just say this right now, for members of the Socialist Party in Germany. You don't even have that as much with the communists, but with the socialists, especially the SPD, which really originated out of West Germany, with these Gumbas and that part. That is not my party to begin with. But let me explain this whole thing so you can see this in a full context, because this is not so much that he said this because Joe Chialo is black, but there's a much bigger story behind this, and you have to know this to understand Scholz's reaction, and then you will understand on how backwards the SPD, the Social Democratic or Socialist Party of Germany, basically is today, even today. Over 100 years after the 1918 revolution. But let me start here. We all know what a jester is the basically today we would say a stand-up comedian who was employed by the court, usually by the king or by other, aristocratic member of the aristocracy, who was able to have a staff of entertainers employed at the court. Musicians are one of them. You had clowns, you had all sorts of people, and the jester was one of them. The jester was also the person with the most with the most freedom at the court, because he was able to actually make a joke out of the king. So, putting like a mirror in front of you. He had a lot of leeway, and he was able to get away with things he couldn't get away with otherwise. Now, if you think about this, first of all, to call someone a jester in a context about a political discussion supporting a party or using the support of a party no one really wants to have to do anything with, is really strange, because it makes no sense, since the job in itself is a comedian. You could just, we don't have any courts, especially in Germany. So you can say, well, he could have called him a comedian. You're a comedian. That would have been more appropriate. if he thinks he needed to call him that. But the question is, why did he call him a jester, which is usually associated with monarchies, with the court, with the king, and that sort of stuff. Well, there's a story behind this. Joe was born in Bonn, I think, in the 1970s, early 70s. And so he was born and raised in Germany, but his ancestors, his direct family, they come from Tanzania. And Tanzania was, back in those days when we had a monarchy in Germany, East Africa, that we called it to the East Africa. My family, our direct line, we started to operate a coffee plantation in about 1885, 1888, somewhere around there. And they were called the Prinz Albrecht Plantations, or in German, Prinz Albrecht Plantagen. When you Google this, you will find very little on it. There's virtually no references to it in Wikipedia, whether in English or German or any other language. We had two, compared to today's standards, they were very small, plantation, and they were coffee plantations in a village called Usambara. Usambara, in the Usambara Mountains, that is in the northern part of Tanzania, on the inland towards the Kilimanjaro. If you have ever traveled, there's a beautiful area. And we got along with the local people there, the native people, without any problems. And the coffee business is not an ongoing kind of thing like you have with cotton or any of that stuff. The harvest time is very short. It is not extreme labor intense or any of that stuff, because you're basically picking the coffee beans green of the trees, and then you basically roast them and you pack them in bags, 50 pounds, 100-pound bags, and they're being shipped off. And they were sold. We sold our coffee in Germany at that time, so from 1890 on until 1930. That's when we sold the plantations in 1930. As Usambara coffee. That was labeled Usambara coffee. It did not have our name, but we had the two plantations there. And we had a plantation manager there, and they got along well. And there was a German store. One of the German citizen there had a store, and the native people got paid in Reichsmark, in the gold mark back then, for their work at the plantation. And they went to the German store and they bought schnapps there, and they bought Krugklocks and that sort of stuff, whatever they may have needed, belts, leather parts, boots, whatever they wanted to buy, they purchased from it. And that worked pretty well. Out of this environment, there was Joe's family. We got along with these people very well up there in northern Tanzania. But in southern Tanzania, there was around beginning 1902, this was about the same time you had the O'Hara uprisings in West Africa. Not just the German colonies, but also the British and Dutch colonies had their problems at that point. And what we ended up doing was, in southern Tanzania, there were cotton plantation, and even though it was a German colony, there were a lot of British settlers there. And the British settlers engaged in cotton trade, or cotton growing and cotton trade, more so than the German settlers. And I have to apologize to my British viewers. I do not want to upset you, but this is just how the whole history basically worked out. And there were a few German settlers who also went along with the cotton growing. Anyway, down there, the native people started an uprising against the cotton growers for a wide variety of reasons. They were not as well treated as what happened in northern Tanzania, where everything is hills and rainforest basically, in coffee environment. These are totally different areas and agricultural endeavors you're getting into. But anyway, so Joe's family participated with the colonial forces, the German colonial forces, to put down the uprising in southern Tanzania, which resulted in some form of a genocide. Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. And this is now where this whole thing, you have to know this. So this is why Scholz, on purpose, used the term Jester to refer to Joe as a servant to the king, to the Prussian king, or in this case, it would have been the Emperor Wilhelm II at that point. And this is where this gets so politically explosive. So he didn't call him a jester because Joe is black, but he called him a jester because of his ancestors' engagement and active support of the German Empire colonial forces putting down the uprising in Tanzania, his homeland, or the homeland of his ancestors, even though he had nothing to do with it. And this is something I have dealt with ever since I can remember. As soon as you deal with social democrats over in Germany, you have immediately an anti-monarchist movement, and everyone in any way, form, or shape was involved in any type of these colonial days, is like suspect. So it doesn't matter if you're black or if you're white, if you're green or purple. It is only the fact that your family supported, some suppression of a uprising of local people and the exploitation of the native people and all of this, the stuff that comes with it, basically. Now, I have told my viewers here, you here on my channel, which I appreciate you being here, that I have lived for 10 years in Hawaii, and I lived on Oahu. And on Oahu, there's a large group of Samoan people there, which is today mostly American Samoa. And American Samoa was at one point, before the end of World War I, a German colony as well. And we were so well respected. I have to tell you one thing. Out of two ethnic groups I have dealt with in the Pacific Islands in general, but particularly with with native Hawaiians and native Samoans, I have never experienced more respect from any group than from those people, because of what we did when Samoa, especially Samoa, was part of our, colonial part. Germany, the German Empire, came very late to the game with the colonial times, and with colonial possessions, and it was very limited to East Africa, which is Tanzania today, West Africa, where things got really, really out of control there in 1902 until 1907. And then in Samoa and other parts where there were no issues at all, like in northern Tanzania, where we had our plantations, there were no uprisings, there was no slavery, there was none of this stuff. So we are well respected, and I can attest to this firsthand as a German. And the funny thing is, since I've never traveled to Samoa, but my friends, I have very close friends from Samoa on Oahu, and they showed me pictures, and you can see all the bridges. The colonial administration built these rock bridges. They're all standing. The roads all have fallen apart, but all the bridges are still there. There must be like 50 of them. So you could basically restart or, recreate the infrastructure which was there at one point or another, which kind of deteriorated since the Americans had taken over. So this is just something to give you an idea to think about it. So here now we have the issue that Scholz immediately lashed out, and he couldn't control his temper, and he called him a jester, reminding him directly or indirectly that his ancestors supported basically the colonial forces in Tanzania with the uprising and the genocide which resulted out of it. The public doesn't know this. Here, I watched the Spiegel interview for Spiegel and Scholz today after this all transpired, and I listened to Scholz's explanation, which is a pile of bullshit again. Here as well is he knew exactly what he did, and this is exactly how he intended it, and he was banking on the fact that the German public is too ignorant to even understand the issues about Tanzania or the ancestral background of Joe Chialo, basically. And so now he's saying, well, I called other people this, and it's a pile of bullshit. He did this exactly for that purpose, and it fit exactly on how it was supposed to intended to hurt, and it was a punch under the belt, line, kind of, so to speak. I had to get this off my chest because this is ridiculous, and this is something I have seen. And like I said, it's the primary party, which is that anti-monarchist, anti-colonial, anti-Prussian, is the Social Democrats. You cannot vote for these people. They will do this. So, and now Joe, even though he had no relations to any of this stuff, I mean, the guy wasn't born until 1970. This transpired 70 years earlier, in a time where his father probably hadn't been born yet, or his mother, for that matter. And this is kind of on how mixed up these people are. And you really have to question this if a chancellor, if a person like Scholz is suitable to be a chancellor for Germany. Someone who actually then pushes people down because of their colonial affiliation the ancestors may have had, and they're bringing this up in 2025. It is beyond comprehension. That's an important aspect in this. And now I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to mention something else, and I think, no, I'm just going to leave it by that for today. We're going to make a little bit of a shorter video, and I will come back here in due time, and you have a great evening.